Imagine presiding over one of the nation's major food assistance programs, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that helps feed more than 40 million Americans, and that this is just part of your job. Few people have seen the inner workings of federal and state food assistance programs as deeply as today's guest, Kevin Concannon, former Undersecretary for Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services in the U.S. Department of Agriculture under President Obama. Welcome to the Leading Voices in Food. I'm Kelly Brownell, Director of the World Food Policy Center at Duke University and Professor of Public Policy at Duke. In his time as Undersecretary, Kevin Concannon was responsible for funding and administering the Food and Nutrition Service and promoting healthy dietary guidelines through the Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion. Working in partnership with state and local organizations, he oversaw the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, formerly known as the Food Stamp Program, the child nutrition programs, including the National School Lunch, School Breakfast, and Summer Food Service programs, the Child and Adult Care Food Program, and the Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, known as WIC, and more. Prior to his work at USDA, Kevin served as Director of State Health and Human Services Department in Maine, Oregon, and Iowa. He has championed expanded services, improved access, alternatives to institutions, consumer choices, affordable health care, and diversity. Kevin, few people have had a career of public service as you have, so on behalf of the nation, please accept my appreciation and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm pleased to join you here today. I have felt very fortunate over the years to have those responsibilities, and as I reflect back on those times that went by, frankly, in retrospect, far too quickly, I'm pleased with what we were able to get accomplished.
Well, Kevin, let me begin by asking about the impact of food assistance programs like SNAP and WIC. Are they effective? Are they cost effective?
Yes, they are on many, many fronts. Actually, the food assistance programs, as you know, as you mentioned, serve more than 40 million people each day across the country. And people come on the program and go off over the course of the year, so that they're actually, in a calendar year, there are millions more who benefit from the program. It not only provides the opportunity for individuals and households to access food in the U.S., but it also is one of the major components of the safety net, a frayed safety net, I would suggest, over the past decade or so, if not longer, where in the past low-income households across the U.S. might have expected or been able to receive financial assistance in various forms. In many parts of the country, that has disappeared. So by default, the SNAP program has become one of the major sources of household support for food that allows that household or individual then to whatever other meager income they may have to spend that on housing or electricity or transportation or what have you.
So, Kevin, can you make an argument that for every dollar invested, the nation gets more than $1 return?
Yes, actually, indeed. I know the Economic Research Service, a different mission area within the U.S. Department of Agriculture, estimated that for each dollar expended by SNAP, it creates between $1.74 and $1.80 by virtue of the multiplier effect. And some years ago, actually about 5 years ago, I sat in on a meeting with at the Brookings Institution with major economists from around the country who were reflecting. The topic of that session was what worked in the last recession, that deep recession we had in 2010, 2009, 2010, 2011. And the opinion was unanimous that the most effective intervention in terms of mitigating some of that distress in individual households as well as in the broad economy was the success of the SNAP program. Because as you know, it's very portable. It piggybacks, the benefit distribution piggybacks onto the commercial electronic benefit systems. And it is portable in the sense that the program serves people in cities, in rural areas, in isolated parts of the country, as well as in some of the most densely populated urban areas.
Well, Kevin, you alluded to this just a moment ago, but you became Undersecretary in 2009, just after a very significant economic downturn. How did that impact your work and what was going on with these programs?
Well, when I think back on my time as a federal employee in that role, I really, appreciate the importance of these various federal nutrition programs that were available to be deployed immediately. And fortunately, one of the first major acts that the Obama administration brought forth was one intended to mitigate the negative effects of the downturn and stimulate the economy. And additional benefits through the SNAP program resulted in, a rather dramatic rise in enrollment, reflecting what was going on in American households. And I saw my particular role at that time as moving around and meeting with state officials, principally department heads, in posts similar to what I had held in Iowa, Oregon, and Maine. So I had some familiarity with the discretionary role of state appointed leaders, not just the elected leaders. And I used that time period to both to press and to urge and support state leaders that were availing themselves of options made available through federal policy to bring the program to individual households, individual communities across the country. And I think it really clearly had an impact, again, not only individually, but on the respective economies of communities that were really being adversely affected by that downturn.
Kevin, let me ask about that a little further because I know there are differences across states in the percentage of people who are eligible for these benefits who actually have them. And I understand
Right.
that is due in part to customs across states and differences in leadership. Why is that the case that there are differences from state to state in the number of people who are enrolled?
That's one of the takeaways for me personally that I saw. I had worked in 3 states, different states geographically, but at least at that point in their histories, or when I was working there, not because of me, but because of the general political climate, these were states of I would say centrist states, centrist to the left of center, modestly. And the operating ethic in government in each of those states was to avail the state agency of options federally. What I learned during my federal years was that isn't the case across the country. That was disappointing to me to see states at times where there was great need, but where politically the ideology of the state or the lack of real, what I would describe as authentic commitment on the part of state leaders, appointed or elected, where they were really disinterested or not that concerned about the circumstances of their populations. We measured states based on their poverty rates and the rate of penetration, if you will, or engagement in the program. And I'm pleased to report that over time, we increased the average participation based on estimated eligibility by double digits across the country. And and we particularly focused on certain subpopulations that were underserved, including, for example, people who are working part-time, often made the assumption, gee, since I'm working, I won't be eligible for a benefit. Well, yes, in fact, based on household size and income, you might be. Seniors were another group. Latinos or Hispanics were another large subpopulation that were underserved. So we focused with states on those populations in particular and urge states to take steps to reach out to those populations.
Kevin, some people may think that the differences from state to state are just economic. Some states don't want to spend money and want to use it for other reasons, but that turns out not to be the case. Is that right?
That's exactly it. The irony is that the benefits that are provided through the SNAP program are 100% federally paid, as is true of the WIC, the Special Program for Women, Infants, and Children, focused on a population of very young children, infants, and pregnant women or new moms. And in both of those instances, the state does not require the state to spend money on the benefit. In the case of SNAP, the state is required to pay a portion of the administrative costs, but the administrative costs associated with SNAP are a single digit when compared to the benefit amount itself. And the case can be made that just from a pure economic benefit point of view, it benefits the state. So when states across the country, or sometimes counties within states, are less inclined to support the program, it more typically reflects their ideology or political culture rather than an honest assessment of the need.
And what are some of the issues regarding incentivizing healthy foods and healthy eating within these programs?
Well, some of the challenges, as you may know, the SNAP program allows persons to purchase any foods in the U.S. for which basically the criterion is there a barcode that can be associated with that if it's sold in a store or in farmers markets. The only limitation is you cannot buy hot food. But even that, there are a couple of states, California being one and Arizona second, there may be a third, Missouri, where the state elected to allow certain populations to use their benefit in restaurants. The underlying rationale for that was really to help either disabled persons or seniors living alone and or homeless people. But by and large, that has not been adopted across the country. Now, back to your question on incentivizing healthy foods. We have the closest we've come to that has been the expansion and promotion of farmers markets, access to farmers markets. We went from roughly in the beginning of the Obama administration, under 1,000 farmers markets across the country that were authorized to process SNAP benefits, to, at last count, in excess of 7,000 farmers markets. There have been, we had a very significant pilot project in Western Massachusetts that created financial incentives for households to buy more fruits and vegetables that actually showed such incentives can work. And it was a very expensive project in terms of not so much the benefits as much as the evaluation, but it showed that you can incent people in certain directions. And I actually had some discussions with people in New York State, in New York City, that never came to fruition because we never quite settled on a subpopulation within New York City to both put some either voluntary or mandatory limits on purchasing of certain foods, like sugar sweetened beverages as an example, and coupling this with some additional either purchasing benefits for the households that would participate in such. We never really got to settle on that. And I have resisted the state of Maine, my own native state actually, submitted a request to put limitations on SNAP purchases, but there was no rigorous evaluation with it. And frankly, I personally couldn't I couldn't overlook the fact that the state itself had basically gutted its public health programs during that particular administration. So it really didn't, on other fronts, have much of a record of saying we're genuinely interested in trying to affect for the better the health of the populations. But we didn't outright said you can't do this. We said you have to resubmit it with a stronger evaluation. And of course, I'm no longer there, so I don't know what the status of that is.
Kevin, these programs have been around for many years. How do they fare under different political leadership in DC?
Well, it's interesting. This very week, as we're recording this podcast, I'm awaiting. We expect within days the so-called Farm Bill of 2018 to be released. A House version was passed earlier this year that had what I would consider a number of punitive elements in it as it pertained to the SNAP program around work requirements and other restrictions. Happily, from my point of view, the Senate has more bipartisanship, at least on the Farm Bill issues, and has from the outset, the leadership of the Ag Committee has said they're not interested in moving forward with those elements, in the recognition that it would probably kill the bill in the Senate, period. So the politics of the Farm Bill are really important for, one, the funding of the program, but also the authorizing of the policy elements in it. And I'm enthusiastic about the changes that are forthcoming or will be forthcoming when the new House is seated in January, because we clearly see more of both a recognition among the members on the House side of the importance of the program, but more of a desire to say, how can we constructively address issues of food insecurity or folks just eating by virtue of where they live, not having access to healthier foods consistently. And programs like school meals, this past week, actually just within the last couple of days, the current administration at USDA finalized federal regulations that will allow schools, if they so choose across the country, to what I would consider weaken the nutritional values in the school meals program by allowing schools to delay their adherence, if you will, or meeting standards to lower sodium in the foods that are consumed, to not be as required to meet new or meet existing standards for whole grains, and to reintroduce fat content in the sugar sweetened milks that are currently served in schools. A compromise was reached some years ago on allowing schools for milk consumption to continue to serve, if they so chose, flavored milk. But the requirement was, one, the sugar content can't be over a certain number of milligrams, nor can there be fat content above the non-fat level. Well, the current administration has basically said we're not interested in sticking with that. And I think that's really unfortunate, because it really shows to me the influence of industry. And it's not, the professional nutritionists and dietitians are not the voices that are asking for these changes. It's really coming from industry, and I think regrettably so.
Kevin, one of the issues that comes up sometimes in the discussion of the SNAP program is fraud. What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, ironically, this used to be reflected when we were at USDA, including the Secretary Vilsack would remark on this. We actually have a higher percentage of fraud in some of the major agriculture programs than we have in the SNAP program, but we have the actual percentage. There are two ways to measure fraud or misuse. One would be for the benefit to go to households that really don't qualify for it. meaning their income is higher than would normally qualify them, or they're not reporting significant income. The percentage of fraud in that regard, or it's really more payment errors, we would refer to it, because some of them are honest mistakes, are in the single percentage. They're like 2%, 2.5%. Fraud, in the sense, a more potent version of it, in my view, is where benefits, electronic or SNAP benefits, are sold by stores. A household comes in, a low-income person comes in, and with their benefits on an electronic card, like a debit card almost, and the store recognizes that they may have $100 in benefits, says to the household, "I'll give you $50 in cash for that $100 benefit." And that percentage across the country is a little over 1%. So it's a very low percentage, but it's a troubling or worrisome percentage in the sense that people really latch onto it. I'm talking about people who are critical of needs-based programs or safety net programs. So we worked hard to utilize more data analytics, more undercover folks, but it was more data analytics helped us identify stores across the country that might be engaged in doing this, and they are kicked out of the program if they're found doing this initially for a period of months, but then it can be a lifetime. And we stiffen those penalties during my time there, but it's a very, very small percentage compared to almost any other type program. But again, one that even at House hearings, particularly with House, not so much the Senate, the House members, particularly more politically conservative members, would try to amplify or try to state, often without much evidence, that they thought this was more widespread than it really is.
Well, Kevin, thank you again so much for your public service and for being a champion for people in need and for spending some time with us today on our podcast series.
Happy to do it, and happy that you're focused on this. It is one of the most important aspects in terms of quality of life for people across the country these days. We didn't get to talk much about the Women, Infants, and Children's program by virtue of time limits, but as you probably recall, WIC serves half of the births in the United States, one of the most important public health interventions we have, because if you have healthy nutrition throughout a pregnancy and good timely advice as a new parent, promoting as well the benefits of breastfeeding, you get better birth outcomes, and these better outcomes can extend over the life course. So again, a program not necessarily well known to the average person on the street, but pediatricians know it well, obstetricians know it well, and half the mothers and parents in the U.S. know it firsthand.
Well, Kevin, thank you again. Our guest today has been Kevin Concannon, former USDA Undersecretary for Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services. And thank you to our listeners. Please subscribe to the Leading Voices in Food at Google Play, Stitcher, Radio Public, or Apple Podcasts, or by visiting our website at the Duke World Food Policy Center. This is Kelly Brownell.